by the story and the emotion that's so deep in every page and the beautiful writing. So for me, this is a true honor to share with everyone here. So hopefully some beautiful insights so that people can get a sort of inside look at the book that you've written. The book just came out Tuesday, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And just in case there's someone here who hasn't already figured out what it's about, do you want to give like the very quick premise of what the book is?
Yes. I mean, everyone should have already finished it, obviously, before coming here. But it is about a scientist who invents a cure for grief. And this cure requires people to go to sleep for a prolonged period of time in this sort of treatment center in the desert. And so it's about kind of the, who would seek out this cure for grief, what are the potential sacrifices, and we follow 4 characters who are on a road trip trying to get to this treatment center for their own kind of various motivations.
So one of the questions that you and I were actually talking about right before this is what was the spark for you to write about grief and to write this story? Was there a moment where it crystallized for you, like, this is what I'm writing, or did it kind of come over time? What was that spark for you?
Yeah, because I had written the first book, The Measure, and that was already kind of out in the world, and I was really struggling to come up with another idea for a new book, and one that kind of was as exciting and sort of interesting for me as the first book had been. And then I was in a period of grief in my own life in 2022, and remember feeling very much that I just wanted to like go to sleep. Like that was the main, I think anyone who's ever been through probably any difficult, period of time or period of heartbreak, you just like sleep is the main escape. And I was thinking, I just want to go to sleep and I'll wake up on the other side and, feel better. And I was thinking this and looking up at a poster in my bedroom, which was a scene from the movie The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy is asleep in the poppy fields. And then it's just kind of like clicked in my head, like, oh, what if this is a real place? What a place called the poppy fields, and people could do what I want to do right now, which is go to sleep and wake up and feel better, go to sleep with whatever they're going through that is difficult and they want to kind of just fast forward through, sort of unfeeling. And then the story was sort of born in that moment, that night.
And then how long did it take for that to fully form into the book that we get to read today?
2 years, probably. I kind of started writing a, outline and thinking, who are the characters, what is this place? And pitched it to, my team who had worked on The Measure with me. And they were like, okay, like this seems interesting. You can run with this for a little bit and see where it goes. And I think because I kind of had that initial Wizard of Oz sort of inspiration, I was like, maybe I can draw a little bit from that and write this as a journey narrative of, a group of strangers who kind of get thrown together on their way to this shared destination, a la sort of like, the travelers on the Yellow Brick Road.
Yeah.
And so I have my travelers in a yellow rental car going to the poppy fields.
I wanted to ask that, like, was that purposeful from the beginning, this homage to Wizard of Oz, or did it kind of morph into it as you were writing and you realized, wait, these characters are connected? Yeah. You had the poster on the wall, but was that really there always from the beginning, this connection?
Yeah, I think I very early on was like, this is not going to be a modern retelling of The Wizard of Oz. And so I don't think there's an obvious, like, the characters aren't meant to be specific parallels to the characters in the original, story. More just kind of like little allusions that I thought would be fun, almost like Easter eggs sort of in the story. And then, the idea of making it a journey, making it a road trip, also made sense to me kind of thematically and symbolically, that it's a story about, going through loss and going through the healing process. And so the sort of the idea of the journey, the road trip as a metaphor, and, the fact that it's windy, there are detours, there are setbacks, everyone is kind of driving at their own pace and moving through, this process at their own pace. I felt like it made sense thematically as well as kind of a story structure.
It definitely does. You and I were talking about that, perhaps because we both are writing about grief, that may have been sort of spurred by going through the pandemic. Do you think that's where that came from? You also mentioned that you were also going through your own grief. Was it the combination?
I feel like I feel like it's sort of having like stories about grief and healing and mental health are kind of having a moment right now. Not that we haven't, been drawn to those topics before, but you know, in TV, there's like Shrinking is all about grief and mental health, and like The Bear has like grief and mental health. Like I think it's it's something people are wrestling with right now in all forms of stories. A lot of great books right now, Blue Sisters, My Friends. There are just so many books that are sort of in that space, and so perhaps it is because we all went through this massive experience with the pandemic, a time of just loss everywhere, and not 100% knowing how to process all of this. I think people like us who want to process things through writing, that's what we turn to.
And also that connection of finding connection with others, which is so critical in this book, like that becomes sort of our lifeline. I want to take a moment and talk on grief, and I actually am going to read something from the book briefly.
Sure.
I think you write about it so thoughtfully, and often we're told that grief is something that is meant to be sort of our own, and we experience it on our own, and we don't really talk about it with other people. And Sasha thinks to herself, and I'm quoting here, how often people praise the sturdy and how clearly they pitied the crumbling, how blatantly they admired the stiff upper lip and cringed at the one that quivered. What inspired this language in this book and this approach to thinking about grieving?
I think kind of, as you were saying, like that we have a sense of sort of expectations, like what is normal when someone's grieving. I think there's a lot of impatience kind of in society for people who are going through something to like, okay, that was last week's problem. Like it's time to move on now. And, whether it's going through the end of like people going through the end of a relationship, a divorce, and it's like, okay, we'll get back on the horse, like go out and date again. Or people who have, lost somebody and you get like 3 bereavement days at work and then you're supposed to go back. There's just this sense of like rushing. And a lot of the characters in this book feel like the world outside is rushing them and they are not there yet. And so they need to go to this place and do this kind of radical treatment to, to speed themselves up on this sort of healing journey because the world is giving them this pressure. And, part of the research of the book involved, like I spoke to kind of professional grief counselor therapists, and they were saying that like the hardest thing that we can do for people, so the worst thing we can do is when we put our expectations on them as to what we think they should be doing. And it's like some people, they're going through something and we're like, well, talk about it, you have to. And the grief counselor, like, not everyone's a talker. Like that's one form of processing things. And so, that's not everyone's form of processing it. And so this for me, the book was just sort of showing there's all these different ways that people can go through these experiences. And our best thing that we can do is just kind of let them move through it the way they need to move through it and not put our expectations on them.
Yeah, that is really profound. The other thing I really loved about the grief in this book too is that you really take it as multifaceted. Not just grief is this one thing, but that it comes with other things. I'm going to read something else from the book where Sasha says, the thing about grief is that it's never just grief. For Sasha, grief was also fear. Fear that she might never love again, fear for unknown future. For Ray, grief was also anger at the way he'd lost his brother. And for both, grief was also guilt. And I want to talk a lot about that because sometimes we just think about grief, it's just like the loss. But talk about the multifaceted things that come along with that grief that you really explore so beautifully in here.
Yeah, I think part of why grief is such an interesting emotion for writers, storytellers, like artists, I think why we're drawn to it is because it has all those layers to it. And obviously there's the sadness of missing somebody, but then there's always a little bit of anger. There's often guilt, regret, replaying things that you did or didn't do. And it's so different for every character in the book because it's so different for every human being in the world. And I think, hopefully there is something in all of the characters that different people can relate to. But I find it just, it's a tough emotion to write about, obviously, because it's very emotional and very personal. But it also just, allows you to really get into like different psychologies of the different characters so much because it has all of these different layers.
Yeah, and I think you're giving readers also the opportunity to find a safe space where they're like, oh, I felt that too. Because sometimes if you admit to like, oh, I feel grief, but also guilt, people are like, why are you feeling guilty? Because people always want to placate you. So there was like a real freedom in this storytelling. I don't know if that was what you intended, but as a reader, I really took that away of like, oh, I can approach this idea of grief with a freedom that says, I felt this and experienced it as well. So that's amazing. We're in a bookstore, so you know I'm going to ask about books. Ava has a love of books and literature. She calls libraries one of the essentials, like food and fuel, the nourishment of body and mind and soul. I think we all could agree that like if we could get stuck anywhere, it would be right in this very room. Talk about your own relationship to libraries and books, and like let's go back to a little bit of your beginnings and where did this come from?
I mean, just books have always been there. Like I just I was very lucky that I grew up in a family that always prioritized reading, and like my grandparents particularly, they were just reading to me constantly, and it's just always been a part of my identity, loving reading. And at some point, maybe around like age 10, 11, realizing that like somebody had to write the books that I loved, and maybe I can play around with that, and sort of writing like little short stories and things. But no, I mean just books to me have like opened up my world in so many ways. I've gotten to just step into the minds and of so many different characters and people who are so different from me, and time periods that are different from you, and places that are different from the ones you live in. It's just like it's the one way that you can like travel and go on an adventure, but like in your own, home. And so I feel like I always have at least one character in a book. I mean, I've only written 2 books, but I feel like there's been at least one character who's like obsessed with books. And that's just like me.
Do you have a book that like you remember as a focal point in your life where you're like, I would like to write? Or was there a book that was a turning point, or a book that sort of sparked that interest, like I'm going to sit down and write my own story?
Definitely the 2 books from my like childhood that I feel like left a really indelible mark on me were The Giver and Tuck Everlasting. And so I like wrote them into my first book as like there's a teacher and she's teaching The Giver, and then at some point she's like, wonder if she should also teach Tuck Everlasting. And those are just kind of like my little nod to those those books, those authors, as a way of just showing that they meant so much to me. I kind of wanted to like immortalize that impact on me. And those are 2 examples of kind of sort of speculative fiction, like a little bit of The Giver, more dystopian, Tuck Everlasting, a little more sort of magical realism, and then that ended up being like the genre that I write now. So I feel like they might have had an even bigger impact on me than I realized.
When I was little, apparently I always read underneath the dining room table. That's what my family tells me, all these memories. Did you have a place like that, or was reading just everywhere for you?
I think it was just everywhere. I'll have to ask now. I would like it to be something cute, like under the dining room table. I feel like it's not, and so I'm just.
That's what I would always find. Let's go back to this book and like this idea of grief and therapy that you've come up with. Do you think that there's a real world implication for this? Is there something as you were writing it, you're like, hey, somebody should do this?
I know I had like 1 or 2 people in like early reviews of the book say I wish she had specified the exact science that was going on here. And I was like, if I had, then it would be some other scientist, and like it would be a real invention, like it wouldn't be my fiction. But so I don't know for sure the concoction that is going on in the book. But I decided to use kind of sleep because I feel like the science around sleep is just like so ripe for speculation. Because like oddly enough, we still don't know a lot about sleep. Like we don't know a lot about why we sleep, what happens while we sleep. But we know that obviously we need to sleep because we do. Like it's just like, well, we fall asleep, so we must need to sleep. And we know that it's healing, like physically, biologically, and also psychologically and emotionally. I think like everyone has that experience of, you're like so upset or so embarrassed about something, and you go to sleep, and the next morning you wake up and you're like, oh, okay, it's not as bad. Like something is happening that's processing things emotionally while you're sleeping. And so I was like, I'm going to take that and just take a big leap with it, and just, leap forward and have it be this extreme form of sort of sleep healing. But I think as I was doing the research for this book, I realized like there are scientists who were trying to invent not the sleep process, but like a pill for grief right now. It's actively, there are trials right now. There's really interesting kind of people wondering if pills that are used to treat addiction can be used to treat grief, because of the same mechanism of like a yearning, a craving for something, but in this case, a yearning for someone who is not there, as opposed to a yearning for something you're addicted to. So it's really interesting kind of field that it's not there yet, but maybe in 5 or 10 years, this will no longer be a fiction book. I don't know. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the part I love of this speculative fiction that you love to write, because it does make you go, well, what if they could do this? Would I want to use that as therapy?
Absolutely.
What kind of conversations do you hope are sparked by this book? I immediately know what I was talking to people about, but I'm curious what you hoped or what you were intending.
Yeah, I think it's like my first book, which for anyone who hasn't read it is about like, if you could choose to learn how long you're going to live, would you choose to? And so I think like the main question that all the book clubs is would you choose to know this? And I think for this book, there's a little bit of that as well. Just would you ever choose to sort of take this treatment to go to sleep for some form of pain or heartbreak or loss in your life? And not only that, but then how would you react to if people around you chose to do it? If a family is going through a shared loss and some members of the family want to sleep and some of them don't, what happens then? And kind of what are the ways in which all the communities in our lives, how would they react? If there's a character in the book who's a firefighter, which is obviously a very kind of stoic, traditionally masculine kind of profession where like they don't talk about their feelings, they don't want to go to therapy. That's at least that's what I gleaned from researching the fire. I'm sure there are many firefighters who do go to therapy, but it's more of a kind of these sort of traditional like stiff upper lip kind of thing. And so his community reacts very strangely when he wants to go to sleep, because they're like, we don't do that kind of thing. Like we're the people who rescue other people. Like we don't need rescuing ourselves. And so I feel like I think it could be interesting to kind of hear people talk about how their vision of grief and healing and this sort of process is shaped by just all these elements of their life.
Mm-hmm. And their profession, for example, or other people and how they grew up, or what they've seen. Yeah.
Completely.
I want to talk about sisters. I will fess up. I have 4.
That's awesome.
And I know that you dedicated this book to your sister, who is here somewhere.
Yes. She and I are the same, and neither of us like attention, so don't worry.
And at one point we were talking about your sister, and everyone was saying she looks like your twin, but she's not your twin, right? There's such a beautiful sister relationship, having so many. There's always like this tension between sisters, but also this love, and you kind of go back and forth, and you kind of don't know where you're going to be on the flow, depending on what it is. You
probably all siblings, but my experience is sisters specifically,
and especially because you guys are just a couple of years apart, which makes that even more intense sometimes. I thought the relationship was so relatable and so like off the page. It was like, oh, she clearly has a sister, and then I went back to see that. The dedication. Talk about the importance of sisters and why it was so critical to have this sister relationship.
Yeah. So my first book had a very prominent pair of sisters as well, who were very, very close as sisters and, get along super well. And that is probably more directly modeled off of my relationship with my sister, who we do get along well. And in this new book, then I was like, I think it could be interesting to write about, a pair of sisters who are kind of estranged and then don't get along, and there is tension. And so, doing something that felt like a little bit more of a stretch for me to kind of imagine, but also just, a totally different type of relationship. And I have like that sibling relationship is there, but then also there's the 2 brothers who are both the firefighters, and they're super close, and they both went into the fire service together. And I think just like having these relationships to explore, they're relatable because it has this, like, everyone has family, and every family has their complications. And especially when it comes to something like this, where there's a big life-changing moment, a shared loss, or the decision for someone to sleep or not sleep. It's like, okay, well, you have two people who are really, really close, who maybe grew up in the same household, but are not the same person. How do they both respond to this how do you respond to an incident differently, even if you're like were raised in the exact same way? It's like so interesting that then you can have such diverse kind of responses to things.
Yeah, it makes you really wonder about nature and nurture.
Absolutely.
Because you literally grow up in the same household, but you feel it and experience it differently.
Yeah.
I understand that you guys took a road trip, and your sister went with you on this road trip to do the research. I want to hear about the road trip, of course, but also the research. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so once I had the idea for the book and knew that it was going to be set on this road trip, I was like, well, I guess I have to go do the road trip to make it feel, real and authentic. It was a bit of a hurdle for me because I hate driving. And like a road trip is, like my nightmare. But so I do have a character in the book who who cannot drive, because I was like, this is like my anxieties in this character. She's working through it as I was working through it, like white knuckling the road trip. But it was an incredible experience, and I got to, go to 6 different states that I'd like never been to before. And because of the kind of Wizard of Oz, illusion, like the trip starts in at the Kansas City airport. And then they kind of drive across the Midwest to California. And I mean, just like writing is such a solitary, isolating experience. And so much of it is just like you in whatever your private space is. And so to have this experience of getting out in the world in service of the writing was really great and inspiring. And, so much of it is just changing landscapes and a lot of places that were very, not very built up. It was much more of just kind of me in nature, which was incredibly kind of inspiring. And especially in a story like this, or part of the, themes or questions at play, I guess, or like the question of what is natural or unnatural. People sort of revolt against the sleeping treatment because they see it as unnatural and going against human nature, trying to play God, doing things that are like, it is the natural part of the human experience to feel grief. And so if we try to eliminate it, what are we manipulating in human nature, perhaps? And so I think this interplay of kind of nature versus sort of unnatural is part of it as well.
Talk about your writing process a little bit, because I'm curious, are you a pantser or a plotter? A pantser is you write it by the seat of your pants. And
like for people who don't know what that means, pantser sounds like what are you doing?
And a plotter has everything down into I have seen photos on Instagram that always make me feel like, oh boy, this person has an entire wall,
like the murder board type stuff.
And they have it's all color coded, it's all thought out. Are you a combination? Are you one or the other? What was the process for writing this book? Did parts of it just come to you later, or was it all bam in the very beginning?
I think the process for this book was kind of like a rebellion against the process for the first book, which I did not outline at all, and came to regret pretty fast in the process. I wrote the first draft of the measure was jumping around in chronology, 10 different narrators, just chaos in the page. And then when I started working with editors and stuff, they're like, well, we're gonna move some stuff around. Can we see your outline? And I was like, I was like, is that a requirement? I don't. And so this time I had the idea, and I was like, I'm gonna write an outline, I'm gonna be a good writer. I'm gonna write an outline. And I did start writing an outline, but as I was doing chapter 1, and what I think this is happening chapter 2, I just started I ended up writing the whole scene, and I was like, this is so against my nature. I just want to jump in and do the writing, but I'm trying to impose some sort of order here. So I guess I'm gonna end up somewhere in the middle. I'm never gonna color code, I don't think, like that.
And no red strings from one thing to the other. No. Believe me, I have seen that, and I'm like, oh, maybe someday that's something to aspire.
It feels aspirational. I agree.
I wanted to ask, the poppy fields are designed to help people manage their grief, but some people had a side effect and of no longer experiencing the emotions tied to grief. And one character dreams of a world where, and I'm going to quote, we found a way to connect with each other more, to give each other a little more compassion and grace, to ask people what they need from us instead of always making assumptions. That was really powerful. There's so much to unpack there. Walk us through the thought process there that helps us understand where you're going with that.
Yeah, so I think kind of the first thing you mentioned about the side effect, though, the first thought for this book was just, okay, there's a place you can sleep and you can be cured from your grief and you're healed. And I was like, that's too good to be true, right? Like
Yes.
it can't just be that. It can't be that. There's always going to be some sort of sacrifice in the terms of people here have to go to sleep for a whole month. Like you're missing a whole month of your life, and what do you do about your job and your family and things like that's part of it. But I was like, there needs to be something more. And in a world in which they're attempting to essentially erase the pain of loss, I was like, is there a risk then that you are going to also erase this sort of joy of love? Because love and loss are two sides of the same coin, and you only experience loss and that grief if you've experienced love first. And so I felt, okay, there has to be this potential side effect that some people who try to get rid of their grief are going to get rid of that love, and they're no longer going to be able to feel the love for the person that they've lost. And so then it becomes a much more complicated question of, would you choose to sleep there and heal yourself from the pain if potentially you wake up and you no longer feel love for that person? And that quote that you're sharing there, though, is like, I didn't want to pass judgment on anybody who chooses to sleep or doesn't choose to sleep. I think the only kind thing that we can do is just, give people compassion, give people patience, and try to sort of empathize with them. And there's characters in the book who make the choice to sleep knowing that this side effect could happen. And maybe we, would condemn that or disagree with that. But for me, I just came out of it from a place of, I don't know that person's pain. I don't know their experience. I can't judge them for making that decision. And I hope, that was I just wanted to come at it from a place of kind of open-mindedness and sort of empathy.
It definitely comes across. And this idea of also the connectedness, like this, where we found a way to connect with each other, to give each other a little more compassion and grace. I just felt like that really shined through for me throughout the book. And I was curious if that was intended or was it just something I was reading into it, this idea of their connection being so essential.
Definitely. I think, one of the toughest parts of the grief experience is the fact that it feels so lonely and so isolating, even if you know that, like, rationally everybody goes through this experience at some point in their lives. Like, you don't get through being human without going through this at some point. But when you're going through it, it just feels like you're all alone. And so the antidote for that, of course, is sort of feeling a sense of connection somewhere. And these characters, who are all experiencing a different type of loss, kind of become like this found family over the course of the road trip of, trying to get to the poppy fields and realize that, maybe through their connections, they still need to sleep? We don't know. I can't spoil it, but I feel like for me that, human connection is like always at the sort of, heart of the stories that I want to write. And it was a super integral part of my first book as well. And, even something as isolating as grief and loss can lead to unexpected connection to people because, all of a sudden you have an experience that maybe someone else has gone through as well, if not the exact same. There's this, an empathy there. And so I feel like I wanted to kind of lean into that connectedness.
That connectedness really shines through. One of the things that also occurred to me is that, when we look at any advertising, we look at how things are marketed to us as individuals. It's always more this, more that, more everything. But what I loved was less. It's less grief, less pain. And I was curious, like, what did you, as you're putting that together, what did you hope people would take away from that? Did you feel like people would come away with something more of like being more accepting and also maybe a little less of like feeling alone. What were those mores and less for you as you were writing it? What did you want readers to get more of? What did you want them to feel less of?
I think, I think you kind of sort of already hit the nail on the head. Like, I think for me, reading any story, not just the stuff that I write, any book, you're always going to walk away with more empathy, I think, because you've just spent, I don't know, 10, 12 hours in the mind of a different person. And you're always going to walk away feeling more, I think, empathy and understanding, and more curiosity about other people, what they're going through, especially a book like this where, you sort of get the layers of the characters are revealed slowly. Like, they come into the car and they're all strangers. They're not immediately like, here's what I'm going through. You sort of, you get that over the course of it as they kind of open up to each other. But I think always approaching anyone you meet with a curiosity as to what, what their experience is like. And then I think a little bit less loneliness. I mean, certainly reading for me has always made me feel less lonely, because sometimes you'll think like, no one in the world has ever felt this specific emotion that I'm feeling right now, or had this specific thought that I'm feeling. And then you'll read a book and be like, that's literally it, word for word. Yes. Like, I'm not special, but also like I feel less lonely. And I think that is, I think that's sort of the power of stories.
That's the other thing I think I took away from this is like you sort of have this sense like all these people are going around who are going through this grief, but we don't, it's not like they're wearing a badge or a sign that says that. And you realize anybody can be going through this at any moment. And that grief is sort of like moving through, depending on today might be a good day, but tomorrow maybe not so much. And that really brought that through to me, the sense of empathy, as you say, because you don't know what somebody's going through. Was that intentional from the beginning, like in a way, like saying to the reader, be kind, be soft with everyone, especially after the pandemic, especially, as people grow and mature, they're going to lose more. Was that like a big thing, like to help people see that everyone is in some way going through some loss?
Yeah, I don't know if I like set out with that intention for the story, but I think it's probably just a byproduct of almost any story. Although I feel like if there's any population that like doesn't need to be told like be kind, be compassionate, it's probably like book lovers. Yeah, like they're already there, I think.
Yeah, that's true. So Ellis believes she has to use her greatness to leave the planet or the people around you stronger or happier or healthier. And that's what I feel like this book did for me. How can you help us see how each of us, even if we're not startup innovators, like do the same? How can we make the world better?
That's a big question. Yeah, so Ella's the character. She's the one who creates the poppy fields, and she does it because she wants to make the world better. She also is just a very ambitious person and very self-confident, and believes that she is like smart enough to make the world better. So that's a particular personality. But I think she, through her invention, does have this impact on the world. Although part of the debate of the book, I guess, is whether or not this is a source of sort of, this is good for the world or bad for the world. Is kind of up for debate here, and what she invents is very controversial in the story. But all of the, and then Ray is a firefighter. He's trying to make the world better, through his work. But the other characters too, who aren't so outwardly like, this is my profession and I'm, clearly spending every minute of my life trying to make the world better. They make things better just by kind of their relationships with each other, and just, showing each other a moment of kindness, and a moment of understanding. And they all kind of walk away feeling, having been transformed by this, even if they're not all out there like creating startups that heal people.
That's one of my the amazing thing I took from this book was that sense of like these very small things, like they made profound differences. And I left the book thinking that's how we can make the world better. I might not be able to start a poppy field, but I definitely felt that. And your writing is just so beautiful. I think everyone's in for an amazing treat. I know it's time to open up just in just a second, so start thinking about what your questions are for Nikki. But I'm going to ask one more, which is, what's next? Let us get inside your head. Are you writing another book, or are you just like, I'm not writing right now? Or do you have some ideas? And is there anything you want to share with us? A preview. It's okay if you say no. I did not tell her I was going to ask this.
I wish I had like an answer for you, but I don't at the moment. I'm not like I think the last like month or so has been preparing for this book to come out, and as I said with the first, it took a while for like to get another idea that sort of sparked as much for me as the measure had, and I think I'm stuck in this pattern of like it takes a while to spark. Yes. And the Poppy Fields too was so kind of serendipitous. This like the mental space that I was in, looking at the poster, just this like light bulb thing, and just sort of this random spark of creativity. And so now I'm just kind of walking around every day like sparks, like, you know, are they like anything here? And so I'm gonna be open. We'll see what happens.
I love it. Looking for sparks.
Waiting for the sparks.
Yes, waiting for them. Well, now I'm going to open it up to questions. Does anyone have questions for Nikki? Don't be shy. She doesn't bite.
It's okay if not.
All right, I see one.
Hello. Hi. Can you talk about your purple edges?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
I know the book is gorgeous. And I feel like I can talk about it all the time because I didn't make it gorgeous. Like I didn't design it. It's not me flattering myself. But it's just, I mean, yeah, it's like stunning. And this, I feel like for some reason when the publisher was like, we want to do these sprayed edges, I think I wasn't like on the sprayed edges bandwagon like the way that the rest of, I guess, the reading world is, because I'm like, you don't see them like on the bookshelf, like they're turned in. So like, why does that matter? But apparently it matters. And then when I got it and held it in person, I was like, I get it now. Like I get it. It's very cool. And to me, like the cover is, I mean, it just, yeah,
it's gorgeous.
It's I don't know if I'll ever write, prettier book. We'll see.
And there's a beautiful display at Barnes and Noble, right? Of the whole thing in the window. So it's gorgeous. Yes. This purple is just the absolute. Did you have anything to say about what color of purple? Because it is the perfect purple.
So the color of the poppies was interesting because in my head I assumed they would be red because like poppies are red. That's what we mostly associated with. And then my editor was like, no, we can't do that because then people are going to think it's a World War I novel. And like they're going to think it's like the red poppy for like remembrance. Right. And I was like, are they? Like, I was like, okay. So then I was like, well, then can we do like a maroon or a just sort of darker purple color instead? And I'm waiting for somebody to point out like, well, in the book, she says that they're wearing, because the people at the poppy field sleep in red. And she's like, this says they're wearing red, but it's not red on the cover, but no one has said that yet. So.
Other questions for Nikki? I know you have them.
Oh,
here you go.
So I obviously have not read the book. I just bought it 2 hours ago.
You haven't finished it? Or
yeah.
No, but so I do have experience reading The Measure, of course. And so that book had so many different characters, I think like 9 different main characters that we follow with the very complicated web. And it sounds like this book is a very similar sort of setup with many different characters that we follow. Is that now like extra complicated in terms of future work? Or have you now like...
I always have to have a minimum of like 8 characters in every book. I think I really enjoyed writing in The Measure, like this sort of ensemble, and writing a bunch of different characters who ultimately kind of, their lives intertwined over the course of the book, and we saw how they were connected. And because that book was kind of about a big existential question, I felt like I had to approach it from so many different people's perspectives to just get even just like a taste of, all the different ways that people could come at it. And with this, with this too, it seems like I was like, I have to kind of, approach it from a bunch of different angles. And I also just enjoy kind of stepping into a lot of different people's shoes. I doubt I'll ever write a book that's entirely just one person, first person narration, their perspective. I just love being able to like wake up each day and it's a different person's day for me to write. And so I think, I don't know if I'm locked into it, but I definitely am, interested in it.
That's great question. There you go.
I know you probably can't pick a favorite, but was there a character that you maybe most enjoyed writing?
I definitely can't pick a favorite because it's like they're just all so close to me. But with this book, we have like the sort of the main characters and then a couple of kind of smaller secondary characters who kind of pop in and out and don't spend the whole book with us. But I found them kind of the most interesting to write because they tend to be like a little bit quirkier maybe, and they sort of maybe they come in for a little comic relief or other things, and they were just kind of fun to write even if they weren't my main character. I think that it's like for anyone who has read the book, like Sky and Donna and Johnny are kind of like three of the sort of next tier characters, I guess, but I really enjoyed writing them.
Questions? There you go. Way back.
I'm curious with the measure, I know you mentioned that the question was kind of with book clubs, would you know? And the question with Poppy Fields is kind of, would you do the same? Have you publicly shared what your answer is? Feel free to tell me that I'm over something, but I'm just curious.
For the first book, my answer is that right now I would not want to know. I would not want to sort of open the box and know how long I'm going to live. Largely because I feel like I don't need to make any big life, like I wouldn't make any big life changes right now. And I've had a couple people come up to me in like signing lines or events or things and say that after they read the measure, they like quit their job or they, yeah, no, I was like, oh my God, like I hope they're, I was like, please tell me you had another job lined up. Like, oh my God. But they, they, again, I decided to pursue a passion. I decided to do this thing that I was putting off, which is, hugely like a huge honor. I'm just like speechless every time someone says that to me. But I kind of feel like I wouldn't have to do that. Like I'm already doing the job that is my dream job. Yeah. And as for whether or not I would sleep, it might depend on sort of the loss that I'm going through at the time. And I feel like I can't give a definitive answer because every experience could be so different. But if there were no side effect, probably. With the side effect, I'd have to really, really weigh that decision. Yeah.
Great question.
So my copy doesn't arrive till tomorrow, so I haven't gotten to reading it. But aside from the whole no outlining of the first book, is there anything you took away from the first book that was like, oh, that was a big hurdle in writing, I need to address that differently this time, or anything you avoided or took into it?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I don't know if there was anything that I like avoided or did differently. Yeah, I think I just like had the little extra confidence of like, oh, well, I've written a book before. So like, I'm like, I can get to 330 pages or whatever, like whatever I have to do. Like, I think I can do that. But I felt like I just had a lot more voices in my head with this new book because I had basically anytime a reader tagged me in anything on Instagram and I read it, like that was in my head as I was writing this new book. And so I had to silence a lot. Like the first writing the measure, I just had to silence my own kind of self-criticism and my own self-doubt and like, why do you think you can write a book? Like that kind of stuff. And this time I had lots of voices in my head. And I had to kind of find a way to put that aside and just think, well, what is the story here? What does the story want? And not what some random Instagram user maybe told me that I should write or something. And really, just try to feel the characters instead.
Other questions? Here you go.
How much time and attention do you spend looking at social media, since you strike me as potentially someone who's more of a private person and now you're such a public face?
Public face. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have like social media at all before I wrote the first book. And then my publisher was like, you should like get on Instagram. Like it's, there's a lot of readers there. And it's like it's so great. Like it's, I don't know why I was so anti it before. Like I've gotten to talk to so many people all over the country, all over the world. Like people who send me things in other languages and I have to like Google Translate their DMs to like understand what they're saying. It's such an amazing community there. And I'm like so happy to be there. Like the readers of the world on social media, I feel like are, there's probably a lot of communities on social media that are not as like nice and friendly, but the reading community happens to be like the best.
So amazing. It's the thing I would say, like that is the big surprise about an author. People don't realize that like now people can just reach out to you and share with you what they took away and take in, take a moment with you just to really explain how it meant to you. And
Really?
like, I think about like my own growing up, like I wouldn't have written an author. I would be
Yeah.
terrified that they would have checked my grammar, but
Yeah.
now people do. And do you love that? I mean, do you enjoy that part of the?
Yeah, I mean, still the measure's been out for 3 years, and like every day I still get messages about it. And a specific character that somebody resonated with, or just the questions of the book. It's so wild. And I never would have anticipated it because, as you said, like growing up reading, it just never crossed my mind to like contact an author. I don't know. And the beauty of sort of the internet now is that you can. And yeah, it's every time I get a message from someone, I'm just so honored that they like took the time to like go see. Oh, I wonder if she has an Instagram. Like, just to like even look me up and send that message. It's like that. It means so much.
Yeah, it's amazing.
On a similar note, how impacted are you by reviews when it comes to like Goodreads and StoryGraph and Amazon and stuff? I know every author is a little different. Like there was once that I read a very small book that I think was self-published, and I loved it. And I gave it 5 stars, and then the author liked my review, and I was like, oh my god, you're so famous. Like,
I'm definitely not like scrolling through Goodreads that closely. I think I looked at Goodreads like once right before my first book came out, and there were like several nice things, and then one not as nice thing, and I didn't sleep for like a week. So I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I have to recognize, so like, yeah, reading is subjective. Not everyone's going to like love the things that I write. And they shouldn't. Everyone should have their own taste. I think I mostly just write what I hope makes people think and feel something. But for my own mental health, yeah, I'm not looking at the Goodreads.
Other questions? Because in a second we're going to do a reading. If there's one last quick question anyone has, okay.
I'm just curious because the measure sparked in our book club, and some people weren't comfortable talking about grief and just like acknowledging that life ends, and I feel like this is another kind of topic in Poppy Fields, and I'm just curious how you're so comfortable talking about it, and just like it just is very like brave and awesome, and I'm just curious about that process and how that all works for you.
Well, I think I think there is like a level of sort of remove because I'm writing about these things in a fictional way with characters who I'm making up, and they're not they're not people I know in real life. And I think hopefully also for readers, you can, with both the measure and this book, it is a way to invite conversation around things that maybe you wouldn't bring up normally, that maybe feel a little taboo or uncomfortable, but I think hopefully they're a little bit more accessible to talk about through characters and through a fictional story. Obviously, like the concept of the measure getting a box doesn't really exist. The poppy fields don't really exist, and so maybe we can use them to talk about things that do exist in real life, which are obviously loss and mortality, but talking about them through this through a kind of fictional lens. I think it hopefully makes things a little bit easier.
All right, we're going to get with signing now. What do we need to do next?
That's awesome. Giving us a round of applause.
Thank you.